The next episode, we get this rise of the punk. It's not really addressed particularly, I don't think, in the programme. It's very centred on the Sex Pistols, obviously. I don't think you get that much of a feeling of all the other bands that were influenced by them and came up alongside. You don't get a vibe that the Buzzcocks are there and the Clash are there and the Jam are there. You get this mention a little bit of the Clash because of the Chrissy Hynde thing.
Yeah.
Joining them
Did they even mention that? Did they mention that in the show?
Yeah, there's a bit. There's a bit where she is she thinks she's going to join. I assume they never really say it. She's going out with Mick Jones, I think, and she thinks she's going to join. Yeah, they do. They say it. She's going to join the Clash, and then at the last minute they say, "We can't have you. You're a girl," and she calls them sexist because why wouldn't you want a girl in your band?
She said they were sexist pistols.
It's very like insular. You don't get a real feeling about the whole wave. They keep having documentary footage of real punks interspersed to show like this was what was happening. And you got these two girls that kind of I didn't really buy
that was terrible.
They travel to the sex shop and
then they kicked them out.
No. But what we do have here in this episode is the Grundy show. The biggest
spitting? Is that the spitting show?
This is the Bill Grundy show.
Oh,
this is This is going on to this I think it's a tea time television show back in the 70s. Like a magazine type show. And I think they went on with Susie and the Banshees or Susie Sue or whatever. And this is the famous swearing for the first time ever on British television, allegedly.
Oh no! Oh.
Yeah. And it's the one. What gets me, because like you, and I've watched this so many times over the years. It's not like I've just rewatched it now, but I've quite often watched this interview because it's quite an interesting interview. And what gets me with it, still to this day, is that Johnny Rotten says shit, and Bill Grundy picks him up on it and makes him say it again. And Johnny Rotten gets all coy and like, oh, I just said a naughty word. And he says, well, can you say it again? He goes, I said shit. But immediately before that, he says to Steve Jones, so you've earned a lot of money from this then, what have you done with it? And he goes, I spent it all, haven't I? Right? But he doesn't hear that. So Steve Jones immediately starts with the word immediately, and he picks Johnny Rotten up on saying shit.
Yeah.
But there was a Doors moment in this, right? This like recreation of reality, where when he says to Steve Jones, when Steve Jones says, you dirty old man.
Yeah.
You dirty rotter, you rotter. And he says, can you say that again, what you just said? And he looks at the camera and he's got his dad at home, his stepdad at home. Yeah. And he's saying directly down the lens to his stepdad. He's saying, you dirty bastard, or whatever he's saying.
Very subtle.
And it's subtle, right? And it's just like Oliver Stone, right? In the Doors film with Light My Fire, they go onto television, right?
Oh, yeah.
And then the producer comes up to him and says, you can't say, girl, we couldn't get much higher. Why can't you say, girl, we couldn't get much better? And then Jim Morrison on the show live goes, higher, right? Yeah. And anyone can Google the actual performance and see that Jim Morrison never did that. So it's like, when you've got an interview that exists or a performance that exists, you've got to be very careful. And I thought actually overall, it was pretty good. If you watch the two versions, it's pretty good.
I did. It was pretty good.
It's pretty good, yeah.
It's pretty hilarious that how much language, you know, like there's movies on every day. I remember as a kid, you know, people's arms getting ripped off and stuff, and that's cool. But if like somebody's breast was shown, it would be like, oh. And we say that, and we will bleep ourselves if we curse, but it's still pretty funny.
It's funny that when I was growing up in the 80s, the thing you could do lots of things and like, but you couldn't say on television.
No,
they'd have to think of all ways around.
I remember when like hell and like shit, you couldn't
crap,
say.
Shit, you couldn't say it. And then when you look into sitcoms and that, they'll tell you how many they have, like a quota.
Yeah, you can only say so many.
Yeah, and I think it was Alan Partridge. I was watching it once, and he at one point he just says, "Oh, f off." I think it's the final episode. He says, "Oh, f off," and then on the commentary, Steve Coogan was saying we were allowed one f in the 6 episodes, and we put it there. It's like a quota. But now you've got to the no, but now you've got to the point because we both grew up in a time where you couldn't say these words. especially on television, but even in real life, you couldn't say it.
Yeah.
But now I find that I have to put one into every sentence I say.
Would you say that I feel like I trust people more when they curse. What the And instantly I'm like, oh, this guy's cool. It feels honest. Like, it feels like the people that won't curse are putting on a fake front. And maybe because I grew up in like a lower class, I don't know, because I'm more comfortable when people are cursing. I'm like, okay, we're comfy. And when people aren't, I feel very like, ugh.
Pretty Vacant is quite an innocent looking little title there. But Mr. John Lydon believes he's singing something completely different. He's singing he's singing a very naughty word.
I read that if you hit yourself with a hammer and you say there is like a 10% reduction in pain, but if you say frick,
yes,
it's only like 2%.
Yes, I read that. That's a proper study from years ago, isn't it?
I completely made up the percentages, so I'm sure
no, but
that's gobbledygook. But
I read that years and years ago. I remember reading that that's true. There's something about that if you stub your toe and you just shout mother if you shout that,
yeah,
it doesn't hurt so much as if you go, ooh,
yeah,
oh Betty,
good golly gee willikers, I chopped my finger off with a saw, gosh darn it.
The hotel, the Sex Pistols go into a hotel, right?
Yeah.
And the girl leads them to the stage and they set up and you can see that they're going to be playing to a bunch of old people. Yeah. It was exactly like the scene in Spinal Tap where they go to the military base and the bloke leads them through and says, so when will we going on then? 1900 hours. 1900 hours, that's 300 hours away? 300. Sorry. But that idea of a band who are totally inappropriate for like a wedding party or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
And they do that scene in this. But interestingly, we'll go on to it in a minute. But
did I Malcolm when they're playing in prison.
The prison. There was a prison one as well, wasn't there? Yeah. That reminded me of that bit in Some Kind of Monster where Metallica go to San Quentin, right? And James Hetfield stands there and he gives this speech right to them. And he goes, he's got his arms spread. He goes, do you know what? He goes, we're not here to sell anything. And I think, you're recording your video for your latest single, you lying bastard. Well, when he goes, I'm not here. I'm here. I'm not here to sell anything. I could have been one of you. I'm thinking you're a multi-billionaire who shoots animals through the head in Russia, mate. I'm not here to sell anything. Anyway, yeah. Sorry.
Oh yeah, the mental patients. I don't even remember this. The mental patients swaying to the top 40. I thought that was funny.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, and I want to talk about the spitting contest.
Yeah.
So there's a scene where they're playing, and a big biker group comes on, and then one of the bandmates turns around and one of the Sid Vicious, I think, and he spits on the guy from the motorcycle gang, and then the guy from the motorcycle gang just spits back at him, and then everyone in the crowd just has a spitting contest. And I have two things to say. Number one, they were really ahead of their time because people around here all did that to protest against COVID regulations. And number two, I will say in all seriousness, where I'm from, if you spit on a gentleman from a motorcycle gang, he's not going to have a spit party with you. He's going to beat you to death. So I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, you know.
I agree. I think when it gets to, it's actually like probably the last episode, but there was a time when at the very end of the Sex Pistols' career, didn't last very long, the career.
The 2 years, right?
2 years, right? Malcolm McLaren, he set up an American tour for them, right?
Yeah.
And he purposefully put them into places where he knew he was all about hatred and causing a rift and a
swell fella.
So he booked them into all these kind of redneck type places across America, places where they're obviously going to be hated. And they'll go to these places and people chuck bottles at them, and Johnny Rotten was constantly getting hit in the face with bottles, and that led to the Winterland ballroom where he just got on his knees and just went, have you ever felt like you've been cheated? And he never played with them again.
Yeah.
But I think you had Sid Vicious, who was literally smashing people across the head with a bass guitar, swung like a cricket bat, like a baseball bat, just swinging it. Yeah. I think that they were quite intimidating. So when you say, like, if you spat in a biker's face, that's the last thing you're going to be doing. Can you imagine Sid Vicious spitting in your face? I don't know. I know he was a skinny piece of nothing, but I think
Yeah, but
if
if you're mad,
up and
but if you're mad enough to spit back at, like, that's the, like, look, if he was
so
intimidated,
that's the bit you got the issue with, the fact that the biker spat back.
yeah, because if you're a biker and you're intimidated, you're leaving. Like, I'm not gonna go, I'm really intimidated by that guy.
But they turned up.
Like,
But I know it wasn't. I know that was the British thing. But in America, everybody turned up to the gigs.
yeah.
Like, they heard they were coming to town, so all the protesters went out and protested, and everyone chose to go to the gigs just to boo and throw bottles at them. So,
Yeah.
like, it's like that thing where a band says something like "We're bigger than Christ" or whatever, and then everyone runs out and buys as many albums as they can to set them on fire.
Howard Stern. They always
Can you
said that with
imagine
Howard
that? I'd
Stern.
be like, thank you. Keep
They always
buying.
said with Howard Stern, half the listeners love you, and half the listeners hate you so much that they have to listen to see what you'll say next. And it's funny. A fun fact too: all those people spitting on each other in that club all actually worked for NASA. They were all rocket scientists. I didn't know if you knew that. Genius.
Oh God.
Just hocking loogies on each other. Do you ever see that Simpsons meme where the old grandpa walks to the door, takes one look, he hangs his coat up, takes one look, and just turns around and puts the coat back on?
Yeah,
That would be
yeah.
me walking in on that spitting show. I would just walk in, take a look, just walk right back out the door.
I can imagine walk past. Oh, the Sex Pistols. I've heard about them.
Yeah,
walk
let's
in.
check them out. They're all
Oh,
hocking
okay.
loogies on each other.
Yeah.
Never mind.
It's funny, right? In this country, it wasn't really mentioned, particularly in this show, but the Sex Pistols were banned from playing live. Probably maybe after the Bill Grundy show. I don't know exactly, but to get round it, they just changed the band name. They called themselves Spot, and they just toured under Spot instead. They called themselves Sex Pistols on tour. The Sex Pistols, right? They got a perfectly good bass player who writes all their songs and can play,
Yeah.
and it looks all right. Glenn Matlock. He doesn't look as nerdy as he does in this show.
Wasn't he a lawyer later? He landed on his feet?
Oh,
Matlock?
maybe.
That's a bad.
Oh, I see. Is that some American show I don't know about?
I think Matlock, he's a lawyer with a white suit.
Oh,
Yeah, you got to put him on. Like when you edit this, you got to find Matlock.
I will. You
He's
know
an old
what I'm
man-
like.
He's an
You know
old
what I'm
man
like.
lawyer with a white suit.
I'll be pasting it on there.
So the bass player landed on his feet. Now he solves cases for the elderly.
Matlock. Is that do people watch
It's
that?
famous.
Do they?
It's a big. I think it
Really?
went off the air like 20 years ago, but he's pretty big, Matlock.
Oh right. Okay. Maybe that was that the basis of the Sex Pistols then?
Maybe.
Is that what right, okay.
Maybe.
But so
His
they replaced
catchphrase
him.
was "Never mind my balls." He'd say.
Never mind my
At the end of every episode, like he'd get somebody like to be on the stand. He'd be like, "Are these your shoes?" And then everyone would go, and he'd look at the camera and he'd go, "Never mind my balls." And then they would cut to commercial.
I mean, honestly, that's probably just as viable as something like Cagney and Lacey. Just
Yeah.
a bloke who just literally has two golden balls and just stands there and goes,
Never mind.
"Balls of justice."
The balls of justice. One is heavier than the other.
Ooh. I don't know. They get rid of Glenn Matlock and replace him with Sid Vicious because Sid looks the ultimate punk. However,
He can't sing
Sid
and he
can't
can't
play
play,
a
and he's
single
not
note.
intelligent, and he's not smart.
he can't play a single note. But it reminded me of a time where it was the early noughties. It was around the time that Coldplay came out, and I was forming a band, and I had a great drummer, but we didn't have anyone to play the bass. But the drummer had bumped into this bloke who looked brilliant. I mean, because I'm not the greatest looking bloke, but this bloke was like your perfect like pop pin-up idol thing.
Yeah.
And we both thought that
Was he doing?
if we had
was he doing
him
like?
in our band,
Was he doing like dance numbers while you played? Like, but baby, bye, bye, bye.
it never got that far. The story doesn't go that far. But if I would have got him to do that, I would have got him to do all of this stuff.
He's like doing no shirt. Ooh, baby,
Yeah,
bye,
yeah.
bye, bye.
So right, we said to each other, we said, if this guy was in our band, we'll make it, right? So he bought a bass guitar, right? And he had never, ever touched it. He'd played it. And I remember saying to my drummer, "It's all right, I can teach him to play the bass. Not a problem. It's the easiest instrument of the lot. I'll teach him to play it, and then fine." And I spent 2 weeks trying to teach this guy to play the bass guitar, right? It's impossible because the musical vocabulary and knowledge you've got, even when you think you haven't got any, if you're coming from nothing, and you say to someone, just hit the open, like just play the open E.
Yeah.
And they go, what's an open E? An E's that first string. Okay, what does open mean? Oh, right. And it was like that every minute of every day.
What's open
So
mean?
I had a Sid Vicious, and I couldn't teach him to play. But what the Sex Pistols did was they just unplugged him.
Yeah, unplug this amp.
And if you watch because I used to watch it again and again, the on VHS, the last concert, the Winterland show. It is quite funny because there are obviously moments in it you can tell because you can see the amp going on, but you can tell he's quite often plugged in, regardless of what Steve Jones says. Sid Vicious is quite often plugged in on it, and you can hear the bass quite there, and it's just hysterical.
What is the Frank Sinatra My Way version? And I listened to the original version, and it's terrible. Like, you can't even hear him. Like, the mix is terrible. And maybe I have a bad version of it because it said it's a famous song, so I just brought it up to listen to it. And it didn't sound
I don't remember it sounding particularly bad.
Yeah, I thought it didn't sound too.
But live, yeah, I was listening to Play Annie in the UK, and you know, he got a few of the notes right, but he was all about. But he's just standing there, topless, covered in blood, looking punk as hell. Yeah. You could see why now the people are wearing Sid Vicious t-shirts and they're not wearing Steve Jones t-shirts.
Well, aren't we in an age, though? And it's interesting because we're in an age of you just have to look the part. And it doesn't matter.
And that's Malcolm McLaren's
you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, Malcolm McLaren's thing.
As much as you hate him for it, he's completely correct. And I think
absolutely
in real life that works in just about every facet of what you're doing. If you look the part and you're confident, you're good. What else, do we need to learn that? And I think I always joke because like the real smart guys are terrible leaders. I'm not saying they would be, but the real smart guy who knows what he's doing, you go, hey, should we do this? And he goes, well, I don't know. There's a lot of things that could go wrong. We could go this way. And you go to the dumb guy that looks like, you're like, what do you think? He's like, yeah, let's go. And then, people aren't following the gosh, I don't know guy. They're following the guy with the blood on his chest that goes, I know what we're doing. Even though he can't play, can't sing, doesn't know what he's talking about.
You're probably right, because out of all those great musicians from that era, like your Paul Wellers and your all your members of the Clash and Pete Shelley of the Buzzcocks and Johnny Rotten or whatever.
Not a lot of Johnny Krieger, or Robbie Krieger t-shirts.
I was going to say, like, if you think about iconic, if you had to pick like iconic images of like an iconic, like a Bob Marley or an Elvis, I think you're picking Sid Vicious out of that whole. Everybody I've just mentioned, you're picking Sid Vicious.
Well, I think a lot of people, when they listen to music, it's you want to live vicariously through it. And I'm not saying everyone, but I'm saying a lot of people tend to picture a member of the band, and you're like, that's what I want to be. And so you look at the good-looking one, and you listen and enjoy the one that actually plays the instruments. And that's why they have like all these bands that like the real people that are really singing and playing are in the background, and they're like throwing red meat at them so they can like eat it because they're starving to death back then.
It's a shame, really, because if it was today, because like you say, you've got like Kiss, but they'll have backing singers and stuff going on. Motley Crue, Ozzy Osbourne's got about 2 singers, I think, backstage actually doing the singing.
Well, when Adele came out, people were like, can you believe this chick isn't the hottest chick I've ever seen? And I'm listening to her. It's bullshit.
She's actually singing.
Yeah, I can't believe it.
But it's a shame in a way, because if it was today and you had an iconic guy like Sid Vicious on the stage, they absolutely would either be running a tape or having a person playing backstage. But the Sex Pistols just went on stage, and they're standing there, and like everything they're doing.
I think that's one of the interesting things about now is because we are so involved in celebrities' personal lives, they can't get away with what they used to be able to. So like no one at the time, probably, unless you were a hardcore musician, no one knew he couldn't play. There was just like, he's one of the cool guys in that cool band I like. I think now there would be people like us doing vlogs and things, And people would go, now listen, when is he plugged in? Look, he's playing E sharp, but why am I hearing a B? Kind of stuff.
It's happened.
As
I mean,
the,
another version, a much better example in terms of the actual talent. But the Manic Street Preachers were a band like in the 90s, they're still going now actually, but 90s, 80s, and 90s, and they had their lyricist Richie Edwards, who actually went missing, dead, but he couldn't play. Right, he was the rhythm guitarist. And he was such an amazing.
That was the funny way you did it. You were like, there's this guy plays guitar, dead.
Yeah, dead. Yeah, dead. Read up on him. It's a very interesting story. Richie Edwards, the disappearance of Richie Edwards, like a proper depressed. It's a horrible story of depression. I think drives to a bridge, presumed dead. Now he's been written off. But great lyricist. Some of my favorite ever songs, but he couldn't play. So on stage, they would just unplug his amp, just unplug him, and he just bash away. And
did he know?
I quite often wonder that, because I think the stories are that they just unplugged him, and he didn't. I don't think he necessarily knew. No.
Oh. Imagine how embarrassing that might be. Why he drove into a bridge. I don't know this guy, but.
Well, no, I'm not going to repeat the story because I've already told it on various videos and things. But one of the best gigs I ever played on guitar, my amplifier wasn't switched on. So, and I didn't realise. How did I not realise? And only at the end, everyone was coming up and congratulating me and saying what a brilliant gig it was and how brilliant I was on the guitar. And I was taking all the joy and everything, right? And then I walked to the stage to pack up, and I noticed that my amplifier wasn't switched on. And I thought, holy shit.
Oh my God.
And that was the most compliments I've ever had, and I wasn't even plugged in.
Oh man.
I was the rhythm guitarist of a punk band at the time. So I can only assume that that the other guitarist was really carrying it very well.
I really dig it's like a minimalist style. It's like almost like I can't even hear the rhythm guitar, because some people say less is more. So it's really, really quite brave thing you're doing here.
Oh God, less is more, less is more. I did write down God Save the Queen, only that I think the biggest thing the Sex Pistols ever did was their releasing for the Jubilee a song that sounded like it was anti the monarchy, although I think John Lydon to this day is annoyed by the way that song was portrayed. He never wanted to call it.
Well, he wanted to call it what was it?
No Future.
No Future. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if I believe
so
that.
So even back then, he was against the artist Future.
He
said no. Oh, and you put I saw that you just changed because you had Sid and Nancy.
Oh
and
yeah.
What I was going to say about Sid and Nancy is I was really surprised because usually when bands start doing heroin, that's when they take off. Like usually heroin leads them to the greatest
heroin
heights.
Improves the musicianship.
Yes,
you get Exile on Main Street.
Yeah. You know what's funny with heroin? As bad as it is, I realized growing up that all of my favorite love songs are actually about heroin, like Golden Brown by the Stranglers. I'm like, that's a lovely tan lass they're singing about, and it turns out no, it's that heroin. What was My Girl? My Girl is about rocks. No, I made that up. But it seems like a lot of those songs,
It's a shame. One of my favorite Nick Drake songs, which I just think is a really beautiful song, and it's his love ode to cannabis. And it's like, that's kind of I'll forget that. It's like I don't want to know that. Don't ruin
hilarious.
it for me. Yeah, don't ruin it for me.
He's singing it all wistfully. Singing about my cannabis. Yeah, like very wistfully.
Yeah, it's a shame. But I suppose I was about to just gloss over the fact that the story of the great film. Have you ever seen Sid and Nancy starring Gary Oldman?
I saw documentaries. Never watched. Again, I don't like movies based on that kind of thing. And it might be.
I love them. Isn't that weird? I just love them. Like I love the Doors. I love Sid and Nancy.
Well, I always find, and I do love the Doors. I just think the truth is always more interesting than sort of the.
Maybe I'm not sure that's
the idealized, the ideal. Oh, I think the Doors are an exception because I think they got the spirit.
Oliver Stone went to town.
Yeah, and I also love Oliver Stone's Nixon, which has a great quote.
I've never seen it.
Yeah, Oliver Stone's Nixon and has a scene where Nixon is walking and he's all downtrodden, and he walks in. There's a portrait of Kennedy, you know, and he looks at the portrait and he goes, "When they look at you, they see who they want to be. When they look at me, they see who they are." I was like that quote. It has nothing to do with anything, but I like that quote a lot.
That's good.
But I wanted to share that. But like,
I mean, that
think,
crashed and burned the podcast, but it was good.
come on, someone is going to be inspired by that. Someone's going to say that like at their retirement party, and they're going to thank me for it. They're going to use that line, say it very. And then they're
Sid
gonna say,
killed
said-
Nancy and then killed himself. Well, what are you saying? I'm trying to talk about the Sex Pistols here. What are you saying?
Who? What?
Sorry, you say what you were going to say.
Nah, it's gone. I was going to try.
No,
to make a Nixon joke
I've ruined the
about
moment.
I was going to say that when taking heroin was the best part of the band. Yeah, it's a shame at how many bands that I've liked over the years that you get to that part in the documentary, and then they discovered heroin, and just the whole thing, and it's just predictable. They die. They, you know, what, Stone Temple Pilots, Nirvana. There's just so many different groups that you know, I liked that just, you know, that drug and drugs in general just takes
Do you
them
think?
out.
Do you think? Having read like the Kurt Cobain journal, you know, the journal was published where they kind of they
I
went
didn't read
through
it,
all
but
his
yeah.
diaries. Yeah, I've got it. It's just a bit strange. I bought it, and it's all of his journals and diaries, and it feels a bit intrusive actually. I'm surprised
That's
they
what I like
were allowed
doing.
to do it.
You know what I like doing on Saturdays? Saturdays are my read people's diary day.
Well, all I was gonna say, because
Dear diary, Mercurial number 6 made fun of my laconic story. Angry heart emoticon. Sorry.
It's true, but I was just thinking that whether Kurt Cobain, because I think he liked the Sex Pistols, I can see parallels there because Courtney Love surely was trying to be Nancy Spungen. I mean, you know, if they had to make a film now, you'd just cast her, wouldn't you?
Yeah. It's just sad. And if you read up on Nancy's upbringing and such, she had a hard life and had a lot of things happen to her as a kid that could have affected her brain. So it's all very sad. And that being said, if either Sid or Nancy showed up at my front door right now, you get the hose, you just spray them with the hose until they leave. Yeah, you just spray them. You don't even have to say anything. You just spray. You just walk out silently. You turn the hose on. You spray these people with the hose, and they'll trust me. They'll yell at you. They'll be upset. You just keep spraying them and spraying them until they leave your
Until they
yard.
walk away.
Yep, that's how you deal with these kind of
They
problem
walk
kids.
away. And it's such a shame if you don't own a hose. You should go and get a hose just in case this ever happens.
Yeah, if you don't own a hose, get one or a sprinkler system. And if you ever want to win over a girl, just write her a note that says she makes you your pee hard. Or whatever he said on that note was just the funniest ever. I think you're hot as shit. Number 2, you're freaking hot. Number 3, you make my pee hard.
I know.
Number 4, you told that funny joke once.
I mean, it was funny that 2 of the points were the same on the list. And it was also quite funny that... So he's dead, right? He's the only... Yeah, so he's the only member that's dead of the Sex Pistols. He's the only person that can't really come back again.
You like pointing that out about people, I find.
Yeah,
Sid Vicious, dead.
Dead. Oh. But because he was dead, right? They had no problems with portraying him as a idiot. Did you notice that?
Reminds me of what Abraham Lincoln said.
he didn't
Abraham
have a brain
Lincoln,
cell.
dead. Sorry, all right, sorry, go ahead.
I mean, I'm going to mention Elvis in a minute. Dead.
Yeah, dead. The curse
they
of the
didn't have a-
doors.
Before we go too far off the beaten track, I'll tell you what. I'll put the Great Rock and Roll Swindle on the screen for those who can see it. But back when we were talking about Rotten, I managed to completely miss the fact that I wrote that in big. You can't even see it. I wrote that in massive letters.
John Lyon's court case.
John Lydon's court case,
yeah.
right? So when they announced this and Danny Boyle said he was going to make this program, Johnny Rotten immediately went to court, took them to court over it, and said, "You are not using. I want nothing
wow.
to do with this, and you
Yeah.
are not using any Sex Pistols music."
Ooh.
And Paul Cook and Steve Jones, and I think Glenn Matlock, but certainly Paul Cook and Steve Jones, both said, "No, we are, and we outrule you, we outvote you." And then John Lydon pulled up what he considered to be a document that they made an agreement that it had to be all members say yes to something.
One
He
for
lost
all
the
and
court
all
case.
for one.
Yeah. He lost. The long and short of it is he lost the court case. But John Lydon, everyone else was involved in the series. I think everyone else was involved with it. I think the actors all met with their counterparts. So the Steve Jones met with Steve Jones, and the Paul
Steve Jones
Cook-
is like, he's like, the key is you sleep with every girl wants you. Every
the key
girl is
is-
sexually attracted to you. Can
key
we
is
get a
you-
better
you
looking
sk-
guy here? Can we get a better looking guy? We need a real good looking guy. And you
I
know
was
what I
a
want
real
him to do?
stud.
I'll just say Essen and Effen. We just need him Essen and Effen. Whole show. That's what he's doing. He's Essen and he's Effen.
But you've got it. You've got it.
It's like
I think
more.
Steve
It's like
Jones did.
it's like more cowbell, except for he's like more Essen
Yeah.
and Effen. Just
Yeah.
keep bringing in
Yeah.
them birds.
You screw a lot of birds. That's all you got to do. Screw a lot of birds. The Johnny Rotten guy didn't have the same opportunity because Johnny Rotten was he still is totally against this. So the reason I wrote that down was because I wonder how he'll deny watching it. I guarantee he's watched it, right? He didn't want the music to be used. He wants nothing to do with it. He's totally against it. I wonder how he'd feel if he watched it. I think he doesn't come off too badly in it.
No.
I don't think he comes off too badly in it.
And I think he's probably the most sympathetic character and the most level-headed one in the show.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I get it. Like, how would you feel if they made a movie about your life based on...
Based on your book.
Yeah,
A
me.
movie about
I'm like-
our
I'm like,
band
all right,
based on your book.
somehow I'm British. I'm like, look, I would just get all the girls, and he'd just be a big jerk and talk about dead people all the time. He just point out that people are deceased while I was banging birds.
Hang on. I didn't spend my whole career saying...
I'd be like, I'm gonna go out with this beautiful lady. You're like, by the way, George Washington, dead. Like, you know, and then you call me, and then like something terrible happened, and like my someone part of my family is like in a terrible accident. You call me, and you're like, Bill, mate, I've got terrible news, and I'm like, what? And you're like, your uncle dead. I don't know how to break this to you, but your uncle dead.
Oh.
Oh, man.
The Great Rock and Roll Swindle. That was the story of the Sex Pistols.
Yeah.
The way that Malcolm McLaren, once Johnny left, he carried on. So
Trying
they
to make that movie. And
He
by the
made
way,
great-
the most I wrote the most provocative part of the entire movie was when McLaren got rid of the asbestos in the ceiling. That was the part I gasped the most. I was like, "Oh God, no!" You know. I don't know. For realism, he actually inhaled asbestos for that scene. I made that up.
you've got to do what you've got to do. But Malcolm McLaren, dead.
I was waiting for it.
The fact that he called the film The Great Rock and Roll Swindle, he was so... And if you watch it, because I've got that on VHS as well, if you watch it, he goes step by step through how to produce a, like, #1 hit band. And it's just, you know, it's swindle them. They carried on for a little bit with Steve Jones as the singer and Sid Vicious as the singer and Ronnie Biggs.
He's not very big because I've never heard of him.
The great... Yeah, do you know the story of that? Do you know the story of that?
Of Ronnie
Great-
Biggs? No.
Ronnie Biggs is a great train robber. He was a horrible thing over here. They had big.
Wait,
they-
he was a
they-
train robber?
They nicked like £1 million from a train, but it wasn't as romantic as everyone makes it out. They killed. I think they badly maimed a bloke or killed him. I think they
Did they
badly
do this
hurt a bloke.
before or after he learned guitar?
No, so then he escaped. He escaped and ran off to Brazil, I think Rio de Janeiro, and he was like wanted in this country for years. And the Sex Pistols, because Malcolm McLaren dead was a dickhead. The Sex Pistols went across. It's mentioned in this program that they.
It's funny because I don't know
Johnny
if you
Rock
knew
was
this.
like, no.
I don't know if you knew this, but Lance from NSYNC, same backstory. I just made that up. No.
Oh, really? He wasn't a great train robber.
He's the Brazilian train robber.
But they went over. They went to Brazil, and Ronnie Biggs was the singer of the Sex Pistols for a bit. Just complete nonsense. And Malcolm McLaren dead was a bit of a dickhead, and
Their
you can see why-
career dead.
career dead.
Yeah.
I think the end was just fizzled out. It didn't even explode. It didn't even end with Johnny Rotten saying on that tape, just saying,
Yeah.
"I get a feeling you've been cheated." It went on. A bit
me
like
ask
this
you-
episode.
Let me ask you this question. Well, this is at least a two-part. Looking at my watch,
It's a
this might. We
This
don't
is
have
a
to film
three-part.
another. We don't have to film another of these for like 6 months.
This is 6 months worth.
But do you think without McLaurin, we ever hear the Sex Pistols? As
No.
ruthless as he was? Yeah.
No.
I agree. Because I think it's like you want to believe, like I said, the lyrics and sort of the idea of giving people without a voice and kind of standing up against the system. People love the image of standing up to the man, but everyone sort of seems, in my experience, to bring their vision of what that is. And it doesn't matter, because I've seen a lot of people, like Republicans, are like, what the hell's up with Rage Against the Machine now? They sound like a bunch of lefties. Like, they don't realize that that's who they always were. And I think with a lot of this music, I don't know, it is about the show. And I hate that, and I do think there are people that do read into it and can kind of, I think this music makes a difference in that it opens doors for people to like look at things a little bit differently. I don't see it as this big revolutionary thing where the world is going to change because I'm going to write this song and everyone's going to realize I'm right and they're wrong. I think at best, like I said, when you're impressionable, it can make you maybe look at things in a different perspective, and then you follow that where you're going to go. And I think he was ruthless enough in a way to realize that, no, it's about image.
Yeah. He knew what we all really know deep down, which is it is all about looks. I think there's even a moment in this where someone says to him, but they can't play. That really does matter. You're giving them a gig and they can't play. And he's like, and they even say to him, you haven't even heard them yet. And he goes, I don't care. He's almost like, it really, really doesn't matter what they sound like. They're going to be famous because, I'm going to make them famous.
And he was right in a way.
But
the band ended up falling apart. But remember when they fired the bass player because he didn't have the look? They fired Glenn Matlock.
Yeah.
He went on to be a lawyer. But but I thought maybe let's see if I can win back for my awful laconic story. This is
It's highly
story.
doubtful. But
all right, let's try. I used to work for some time for an armored car company. And there was a guy that worked for the armored car company named and was a really big guy, real muscular guy. And for all the time I knew him, he never said anything funny. He was a cool guy, but he never said like a joke. And he would go on to say the funniest thing I ever heard in my life. So one day, it's the end of a shift. It's real hot. We're in this big terminal full of money. We're sitting in the boss's office. We're all sweaty. And it's back then, we're all smoking cigarettes, in the office. And walks in, sweaty, looked like he had a terrible day. He says to my boss, he goes, I'm giving my 2-day notice. And my boss looks at him and he goes, 2-day notice? He goes, yeah, I'm leaving today. And he did. I never saw him again. He literally, he just left. I wonder, is it better to be like kind of funny your whole life or to like save up the funny?
Just have
until
one
you can
moment.
launch it like a nuclear missile at everybody, you know? And then I never saw him. Like he did the George Costanza thing where you just say the best joke ever and then you're out. Like he never was in my that man was never in my life again. He dropped that on me and just
And this story is being retold.
Yeah, people say they go, "Who do you think
people.
is the funniest guy that ever lived?" And I'm like, Richard Pryor, Dave Chappelle.
And I mean, it's
like number one on my list.
That is good. That is good. We should have got here to tell the laconic story. Oh God, I've got to do lots of beeping in this episode. In these 3 episodes.
I started the Sex Pistols episode with ancient Greece.
No, that's good. I think we may have reached a natural ending here by having the great rock and roll Swindle on the screen, talking about how Malcolm McLaren was good and bad. No, dead. What would be interesting to people that have only watched this or have only watched the series itself would be Johnny Rotten went on to be John Lydon, back to his name, did Public Image Limited, has always been kind of anti-establishment. Was on an episode of Judge Judy.
Ooh,
yeah,
that's a mark against.
He was quite good on it, and he. Well, no, I won't give any spoilers. Just Google it; it's quite good. But then he went on and did a butter commercial here for butter.
I can't believe it's butter.
It's that kind of thing. Yeah.
Did you ever see the Tom Snyder interview he did just after he got off the Sex Pistols?
Which one's that?
There's a guy named Tom Snyder. He used to do late night with a black backdrop, similar to mine. And he would sit back, and this is like in the 80s and the 70s, and he had like a comb over, older guy, and he'd smoke cigarettes. And he was very serious, wore a suit and tie. And he had John Lydon, and he had the other guy who's in, what's it called? You know it. You died, beep that. I just said your name. Ring the bell. Anyway, he's sitting down, and they're having a very, confrontational interview. And then I think Tom Snyder was a great interviewer. He got him. He said to both of them, he goes, "I've heard a lot about what you two don't like. Tell me, what do you like?" And stumped them both. Like they literally, the one guy's like, "I'll have to go home and think for 6 months." And John literally was like, "You got me. I can't think of anything."
Holy
and
shit.
I think, and I thought
Isn't
that
that
was
terrible?
really...
You can't think of anything that you like.
Well, I think it says a lot.
You spent so much time being anti and aggressive and
well, it's nihilism and nihilism. I when we were talking about Russian literature, Turgenev wrote a book called Father and Sons, where he was the first person to name it nihilism. And there's a character in the book, and they would even back. So this is the late 1800s.
It was like that in Mr. Angry as well by Roger Hargreaves.
yeah.
Sorry, carry on.
No, but they would argue that nihilism is great, and they asked him, well, what happens when you've got everything the way you want it? And he was like, well, we'll still criticize it. And so it's sort of the problem with that philosophy is there's never a point where you go, okay, we're good. It's just constantly tearing down.
Yeah.
I think you need a little balance in your life. I think most people.
It's like that striving for anarchy. It's like if you gotta be careful what you wish for. I think the only way to have anarchy is to have a completely policed society.
Well, yeah, and Noam Chomsky has like a how to do anarchy if you really want to get into like the actual political thing. And then I think Fight Club is a good example of like not modern day but nihilism.
Yeah.
If you're interested in like that kind of outlook and sort of where it leads to.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to.
Well, it leads to a butter commercial.
Butter commercial and exploding
This
buildings.
butter is beautiful. Lovely butter. I forgot what it's called.
That?
Utterly butterly. It's beautiful. Country life, you'll never put a better bit of butter on your knife.
But so we don't end up, because I like the guy now. He also has a wife who I believe has Alzheimer's, and he's staying with her.
Such a shame.
And he's staying with her, and he's raising money for her. And I give him all the credit in the world. So
His,
I don't want to end.
No.
He seems like a really good guy. I think.
He would have done the butter commercial for money. He still. Because of Malcolm McLaren, I don't think the Sex Pistols made any money from the Bollocks. They had to do a few reunion tours because of it, even though they all hate each other. That must have been a bit awkward. And you're right, John Lydon, he gets a lot of criticism because he's put on a bit of weight in that.
Yeah. He's an
But
old guy. He's an old guy.
But it's not even just that, is it? It's like they're criticizing him for these things, but he is looking after his wife.
Well, and he also is looking after. He's big on the blue collar, and I always like that. And he means it. He doesn't just do it.
He seems like an
give
alright
a
guy,
sense- Yeah.
but he's a bit of a prick if you watch certain interviews where he's
I'm sure.
obviously drunk. Just
I'm
like the
like
podcast
I'm
we've
like
had to
defend-
abandon.
What'll happen is I'm talking about how great he is, and I'm sure I'll find a YouTube link where he's like, I like Nazis, like all this terrible stuff. I'm like, no, I didn't mean it. He's not a good guy.
No, he's a difficult character, and there may well be things that he said that we would want to disassociate ourselves
Yes.
from. 6 of one and Bill of the other. Dead.
Smash that like and subscribe button.
Smash the like and subscribe.
Make sure you hit the bell. If you'd like to see when a new
2 hours
podcast
30.
episode, hit the bell. Make sure to hit